You probably imagine knights in shining armor and kings feasting in grand halls. You've seen the movies, stone walls, towering spires, a symbol of power and romance. But what if I told you that the reality of a medieval castle was less a fairy tale and more a horror show of filth, disease, and truly disgusting personal habits? Because while history remembers the battles and the banquets, it conveniently forgets that the lord of the manor and his court lived in a place that reeked of human waste, animal carcasses, and rotting food. What you're about to hear isn't taught in your history books. It's the kind of detail that gets swept under the rug because it's too gross for general consumption. We're going to pull back the curtain on the life of a medieval noble and reveal how a fortress designed to keep enemies out was actually an open sewer trapping its inhabitants in a cycle of sickness and stench. From the toilets that literally emptied onto the ground below to the lack of running water and the pervasive smell, this is a story of how people truly lived in a medieval castle. Let's start with the most basic necessity: sanitation. You think of a bathroom, but they had a garderobe. Now, that sounds fancy, but the reality was a small stone room with a wooden seat, which was just a hole cut in the stone wall. It emptied directly on the ground below, where it would either collect in a pit or be washed away by the rain. If the castle was under siege, the attackers would sometimes fill these pits with burning material to smoke out the defenders, a kind of primitive chemical warfare. The stench inside was so overwhelming that servants would often hang clothes in the garderobe to help kill fleas. Yes, they used their toilet as a closet, but the real horror show was the Great Hall. This was the heart of the castle, where everyone ate, socialized, and often slept. There was no such thing as daily cleaning. Leftover food, bones, vegetable scraps, everything was simply thrown onto the floor to be picked up by dogs and stray pigs. The floor itself was covered in rushes, a sort of primitive carpet. And once a year, they would finally scrape away this layer of foul, congealed garbage, a mixture of spilled wine, blood, and decaying food, to lay down a new layer of fresh rushes. For 364 days, you were walking on a biological waste mat. And then there were the pests. Because of the filth, castles were crawling with rats, mice, fleas, and lice. The constant scratching and the threat of disease were a normal part of life. Plague was not some distant threat. It was a daily possibility. A rat could scurry across your foot at any moment. And what did they do to deal with this? The only thing they could. They would often have dogs. But the real solution was the ever-present cats, who were both pets and exterminators. But the stench. Imagine the combination of stale air, smoke from the fireplace with no chimney, and the pervasive odor of unwashed bodies. There was no clean running water. People bathed only on rare occasions, and the water was shared. A lord would get the first bath, his family after, and then the servants. By the end, it was a tub of gray sludge. The reality is that a medieval castle was a stone monument to human resilience and absolute filth. It was a place of power built on a foundation of disease and discomfort. The very people who ruled Europe lived in conditions we would find unbearable today, proving that glory and power had a very dirty price. Speaking of things you can't unsee, you need to watch my video on the horrifying medical treatments of the Victorian era, where I reveal how doctors used to treat hysteria with electroshock therapy. The parallels to these medieval conditions will shock you.